Can the government require teachers to be fully vaccinated before working? Can the government require you as a citizen to get vaccinated? The answer is yes, and here's why. Welcome to the channel. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and if it's your first time here, don't forget to like this video, share this video, and subscribe to the channel if you like what you hear. Well, this video is about the Pfizer COVID vaccine, now named Comirnaty by the company, just received full authorization from the FDA. Final approval means the government can require citizens to be fully vaccinated. Now, previously, the Pfizer vaccine was under emergency use authorization. Now, what is emergency use authorization, or an EUA? Well, in an emergency like a pandemic, there may not be enough time to have all the evidence that the FDA needs to approve a drug fully. When there's a declared emergency, the FDA can make a judgment call that it's worth releasing this drug for people to use. Now, this is even without the evidence that would fully establish the effectiveness and safety of this drug. Now, if there is strong evidence that suggests that patients would benefit from the drug and circumstances demand it, then emergency use authorization makes the drug available to patients most in need. Now, this is in contrast to full FDA approval, which means that the evidence to fully establish that the drug is effective and safe has been obtained. And this drug is effective and safe. Now, full FDA approval means it's legally authorized for use in the United States. Now that the vaccine is fully authorized for use, the question now is whether it is legal to force citizens to be vaccinated. So let's look at the case law in the United States. Now, this issue first came up in 1905 in a case named Jacobson v. Massachusetts. Now, this case came about 1 year before the FDA was established. Now, in Jacobson v. Massachusetts, the facts are pretty straightforward. The state of Massachusetts passed a law that allowed cities to require residents to be vaccinated against smallpox, which was a disease that was ravaging the nation at the time. Now, the city of Cambridge adopted a law requiring its citizens to be vaccinated or fined. Now, Mr. Jacobson refused to comply with the requirement and was fined $5, or $150 in today's money. Now, this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where the issue was, did the mandatory vaccination law violate constitutional right to liberty? Right? The government just can't stick you with needles and inject things into your body because you have a fundamental right to liberty. And Jacobson was challenging whether the government could force him to get a vaccine. Now, the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 ruling, ruled against Jacobson, saying that the law was a legitimate exercise of the state's police power to protect public health and safety of its citizens. And the court went on to reason that since local boards of health, essentially the FDA before the FDA, determined that when mandatory vaccinations were necessary, thus making the requirement neither unreasonable nor arbitrarily imposed. Now, the Supreme Court has answered a lot of other questions when it comes to requiring vaccinations. For instance, in Zott v. King in 1922, a school district in San Antonio, Texas, refused admission to a student who had not received the required vaccination. The Supreme Court said in that case that it was legal for that student to be excluded from public schools. This is why now most states require students to be fully vaccinated before attending schools. If you live in America and you're listening to this video, you probably live in a state that required you to be vaccinated if you were going to public school. In this case, established that. Hey, in 1995, the Supreme Court allowed random drug testing of student athletes. And in Buck v. Bell, a Virginia law allowed sterilization of those with intellectual disabilities. The court said that was constitutional, forced sterilization. Now, even though under current law, states could mandate that citizens get vaccinated, the law is moving away from this forced vaccination. Like in Jacobson, for instance, either you get vaccinated or pay a fine or you can go to jail. The state now has moved to inducing vaccinations. For instance, you needing to show proof of vaccination to go to work, to go to school, to eat at a restaurant. So now, what can you do if you're forced to take this vaccine and you or your child gets seriously injured because this vaccine wasn't what it's supposed to be? Well, there's a fund for that already. It's called the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, developed just for this purpose. Check it out.
Have you ever heard of the National Vaccine Compensation Program? It's a federal program that dates back to the 1980s. Congress created it in response to the number of lawsuits that makers of vaccines were facing. They didn't want manufacturers to let fears about financial losses keep them from making more vaccines. So they created this program. It's basically a no-fault alternative to a lawsuit. If someone thinks that their child was injured or even killed by a vaccine, they can file a claim. The federal government will then evaluate the situation and decide if that person was really harmed or not, and whether or not they deserve to be compensated. About 70% of the time, the federal government just settles. often without even determining whether or not that vaccine caused the injury or not. Some people say that the existence of this fund is proof that vaccines are unsafe, but doctors say that's not true.
Serious side effects are very, very, very rare. Much more likely than a serious side effect from the vaccine is that an unvaccinated person will get measles and develop a serious complication from measles, ending up in the hospital. It has been proven that the vaccine is safe.
Here's what we found. We took a look at vaccine records from 2006 to 2017. About 1 out of every 800,000 people who got vaccinated filed a claim through this fund. And of those, about 2 out of 3 received compensation. For the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine specifically, it's pretty similar. Just under 1 out of every 800,000 people filed a claim, and roughly half of those were compensated. Now, money for these compensations is made possible through a tax on vaccinations. In total, this program has paid out about $4.2 billion. And on average, each person received a little over $571,000.
So today, what did you learn about? Well, we learned about what emergency use authorization was, what FDA approval meant, the U.S. case law behind vaccines, and you learned about the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Now, the question to you. Should the Pfizer vaccine be mandated to all citizens? How do you feel about the government inducing citizens to get the vaccine? Do you think Jacobson should be overturned? Leave your comments below. Let me know how you feel. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm out of here.